To start things off, I'm an 18-year-old male, and this happened just a few weeks ago. I live in a small town in Ohio called Grand Rapids, about 2 hours away from Cleveland. It's a quiet town, but you'd occasionally have a few local pedophiles and some vehicle break-ins every now and then. Not the perfect town, but common collective. If you're looking for something quiet, Grand Rapids is the town for you. Anyway, it was the middle of summer, and the girl I had been dating had moved over 2,000 miles away from our town to another state. Needless to say, I was beyond devastated and wouldn't talk to anyone. I stopped hanging out with friends, started eating less, and I mainly turned to the internet for support, and after a few months, I decided to let her go and move on. I am not the most attractive guy, but I eventually signed up for Match.com as that was the most popular dating site at the time in hopes of finding somebody on there. I ended up matching with a very cute girl who claimed to be just a little older than me named Samantha. She lived in Toledo, which wasn't too far from my town. We had similar interests, and while she wasn't a 10 out of 10, she wasn't ugly. She had 3 photos, a photo with her and what I assumed to be her friend, a selfie in her bathroom, and another picture of what I assumed to be at a college frat party. We chatted through there for a day and eventually exchanged phone numbers. I got so attached to this girl so quickly that we even started texting late at night about our interests. In fact, I felt so easy around her. I could talk about things with her that I wouldn't be able to around my other friends or even my family. One day, I decided to take it a step further and ask her out on a date. Samantha, would you like to go out for, say, some coffee? She gladly accepted, and we both agreed on a date which would be on a Sunday, as Sundays were the least busy for me and her. Fast forward to Sunday. I'm getting ready and I go to my neighbor's house and ask her if I could borrow her car for the afternoon. It seems like a weird request, but we had borrowed each other's cars before and I thought of her as a second mom to me. At the time, I was driving a 2002 Honda Accord, aka shitbox, so I didn't want to make a bad impression in front of Samantha. My neighbor has a really nice car, so I explained the situation and she understood and let me use it. I made sure I was dressed nice, hair done, made sure I had my wallet with me, and the usual pre-date preparations, and I went on my way. I made sure I got to the coffee shop right on time, and well before she did. I texted, "Hey Samantha, I'm here." Within a minute, she responded with, "Awesome, just left the house. I'm so excited to meet you." At this point, I was beyond excited, but also a bit nervous with my stomach turning and my hormones shaking. I go inside and sit at a table and wait for her to tell me she was here. 10 minutes go by and I receive a text saying that she just pulled in. That's when I notice a black truck with tinted windows in the parking lot that wasn't there before. I was so nervous and just waited for her to come out of the truck. But what came out instead made my blood run cold. 2 men stepped out of the truck and began walking towards the coffee shop. From the looks of it, they looked like bearded rednecks, kind of like the truckers you'd see out on the country roads. I was appalled to what I was seeing, and I quickly left the shop through the back door, trying not to get noticed by them. When I got in the car, I started driving away and saw the 2 men staring at me as I pulled out of the parking lot. I was pissed to say the least, but I've been warned that this stuff could happen. That night, I got about 30 plus text messages from Samantha. Everything from "Hi, how are you" to "You little piece of shit." But there was one text message that made me never, and I repeat never, want to do online dating again. One of the messages read that these 2 were apparently planning on luring me to their truck, only to quote, "knock me out cold and kidnap me." I didn't respond to them, and I never went near another dating app again. If you're planning on doing online dating, please make sure the person you are talking to is the person they claim to be. It might just save your life.
This all happened when I was 19. I'm not the best looking dude, so I never had much luck with women, and ended up on Tinder. I wasn't having much luck there either, until like the third month of using it, when a blonde woman named Katie messaged me. She was pretty enough that I just dismissed her as a bot. It wasn't until 3 days later that she messaged me again, which is odd because bots almost never message more than once. I clicked on her chat and replied, then looked at her profile. What I saw was pretty generic, but definitely wasn't a bot's profile. We had been talking for about a month when she proposed the idea that I come see her. I was pretty reluctant as she lived 8 hours from me by car, but I had to admit I really did like her quite a bit, and I have been thinking about asking her if I could come see her for a while now. After a bit of badgering from her, I finally said that I would take a drive to go see her. At this point, I had no reason to doubt that she was who she said she was. We had video chatted every other week, called on most days. I just assumed that I got really lucky. Things did get a little weird on the way there though. She kept messaging me, asking me where I was, while making sure I was still coming. At some points, when I took more than 30 minutes to respond, she would send me a slew of annoyed texts. Admittedly, I chalked it up to her being nervous about me coming to see her. I was pretty nervous too, so I couldn't blame her. I had a hard time finding her house at first. The directions she gave me were pretty confusing, and it was back through a series of gravel and dirt roads and a large thicket of trees. It was still midday when I came onto an old-looking house. A window on the second floor was boarded up, but it didn't look abandoned, just worse for wear. Katie's red buggy that she liked to talk about was parked in front of the garage. I took out my phone and texted her that I was here. She only sent a smiley face in return. When I got out of the car to knock on the door, I noticed that someone was looking at me from one of the second floor windows. I found it a little creepy, but figured it was just her father or something. She had told me that he comes to stay with her every now and again, so I ignored it and knocked on her door. She answered with a smile and gave me a kiss, which surprised me, and I followed her inside. We sat down on her couch and started talking about our plans when I asked her about her dad. "You didn't tell me that your dad was here," I said. "Was that going to be a surprise or?" Katie looked confused and told me that her dad wasn't here. I still thought she was keeping up the act and told her that she didn't have to keep pretending and that I had seen him looking through the window at me from the upstairs window. Katie went pale and said, "You gotta get out of here, now." We both ran to our cars. When I questioned Katie, she informed me that her dad wasn't there and that she had been home alone until I showed up. I called the police, and while I was on the phone giving my address, Katie gasped and pointed to the window where I'd seen the guy last. He was looking at us from that window again. I got a better look of him, and he seemed older and frail, almost like he hadn't eaten anything in a while. He left the window after he saw that we saw him. The police took a half an hour to show up, and the whole time Katie was crying and mumbling about how she was an idiot for not keeping her doors locked. When the police finally did show up, one started asking me and Katie questions, as the other two searched the house. They came back out a little later and told me and Katie that they didn't find anyone. They did find the back door was hanging open. Whoever it was had ran out into the woods, but the cops were sure that the house was empty. After the cops left, she asked me to stay the night because she was too scared to be alone in the house right now. I gladly did, and we slept downstairs on the couch, as Katie's bedroom was the room that was right next to where the man had been. Katie had also brought out a shotgun that her father had given her, but she has never used. I told her it was fine, the man's gone, but she insisted, saying that she'll feel safer if it's out. I'm glad she did. Later that night, I was still wide awake, watching TV. Katie had somehow managed to fall asleep. From the kitchen, I heard the sound of the doorknob being turned. At this point, I wasn't even scared, I was just pissed. I flipped on the light in the kitchen and pointed the gun at the kitchen door, and there he was. The guy that had been at the house before was standing on the other side of the glass door. He looked shocked, and I'm glad we had locked the door. The man unfroze and yet again ran into the woods. I woke up Katie and told her what happened, and we called the police yet again. When they arrived, they did a full sweep of the woods, but found no one. They told Katie and me that it's probably a good idea to stay somewhere else for the night. Me and Katie said our goodbyes. She was going to stay at her friend's house, and I was going home. I left a little after Katie did. I was on the phone with my brother telling him what happened. My headlights were on. As I was talking, something caught my eye. The fucking man was standing at the corner of the house, just watching me. I gunned it out of there and didn't even bother calling the police again. However, I did text Katie, and she said she was going to call the cops again. I don't think Katie ever went back to the house alone.
For some background information, I was 23 years old when this happened. My girlfriend died a few years ago along with her mother in a car accident caused by a drunk driver. Ever since that day, I was heartbroken and depressed as she was the most sweetest girl a person could ask for. However, my friend had told me about this new popular dating app which I forget the name of, but it had positive reviews and showed promise. I downloaded it, created my profile, filled out all the questions, and searched for local women in my area to date. I am not the type of guy to keep a conversation going, which was a major disadvantage in my part, but I always tried my best. I messaged a few women, and I eventually ended up matching with this one girl who I found pretty attractive and lived about 3 towns over. Her name was Jen, and we hit it off well. Started talking about school, work, our similar interests like music, movies, anime, video games, and so on. We'd chat through the app, but eventually ended up exchanging numbers. Most of the time, she would make up these blatantly obvious excuses as to why I couldn't call her. Everything from my voice sounds so bad or I don't feel comfortable yet. I brushed it off thinking that she had a phobia or severe anxiety of talking. We chatted every day over text, and I'd even go as far as secretly texting her in the middle of class without the professor knowing. This process continued for about another month before Jen had finally said that she wanted to meet me. I was super excited that I would be able to meet her in person for the very first time, and so we both set up a date at the local park a few blocks from my street. Jen had told me that she could see me only after she got off work. So the following night, I walk a few blocks to the city park and sit down at a nearby bench waiting for her while telling her I was here. The park was obviously closed at this time, but there were barely any people out, so nobody really noticed me. I'm sitting on the bench waiting for Jen to text me back. 5 minutes turned into 10 minutes, then 15, and eventually 20, and I was planning on getting out of there. That's when I heard what sounded like high-pitched laughing coming from behind me. I turn around to the building and see some lady peering from behind the dumpsters waiting for me. Due to it still being dark out, I couldn't see their facial features, but I knew it was a woman based on the pitch of her laughing. I then received a text from Jen saying that she was behind the dumpster and that she wanted to show me something. I carefully get up and walk over to the dumpster where Jen supposedly was, when I got a very unsettling feeling. A feeling that only worsened when she texted me again saying it was a quote, surprise. I now felt unsafe being there, and I turned around and headed back to my car. All the while, I was thinking about what would have happened had I taken one step closer to that dumpster. I hope I never hear from Jen again.
I'm a 26-year-old who has lived in Alaska my whole life. This will become important later when you see just how far this person would go to try to be with me. This all happened a few years back when I was in college. Like any woman at my age, I made a grave mistake of attempting online dating. I was using OkCupid to try and find a potential partner, but I also had listed in my bio that I was looking for friends. One day this girl, we'll call her Jen, messaged me. She seemed nice, and we got to talking and really hit it off, but I made it clear at this time I wasn't looking for a relationship due to being preoccupied with work and school. I should preface the rest of the story by saying that I'd like to help people, and it's really hard for me not to. Honestly, it has been the biggest flaw I've had over the years, a contributing factor in multiple abusive relationships I've been in before and since this incident. Anyway, the results of this has been that I tend to drain myself to try to help others, and it attracts unsavory and unstable people. We start going into conversation about our various interests, and eventually we stumble across gaming as a mutual interest. Jen suggests we play a new game, Ark Survival Evolved. It's a cursed rune of games that wasn't very optimized for any system. To be honest, it was an absolute dumpster fire of a game, but at the time I thought it had a lot of potential. So I spent countless hours making various bases and trading dinosaurs. Jenny and I spent a lot of time in the multiplayer, building things and training dinosaurs, and talking and having a good time. During this time, she opened up to me about a lot of the abuse she had suffered in past relationships, and from family that didn't accept her for being gay. Having also been through some difficult times, I felt a lot of empathy for her, and would try to build her up and talk her out of self-hating talk when I had the energy to. This is when the trouble started though. I had noticed that she had been a bit too friendly with me and kept being overtly sexual and flirting for a week or two. It all started in the game, roleplay kind of stuff. She was really nice, but totally not my type. I had to address the situation multiple times, saying that it made me feel very uncomfortable. But every time we had that conversation, Jen would tell me that she understood and would back off. You know the drill. It never got through to her. By this time, we had started having communications on a chat app called Telegram. I wasn't always on my computer, so it seemed like a convenient solution. I started noticing that a lot of the emojis she was using displayed a very similar lack of respect for my boundaries. Just as before, I'd mentioned this to Jen, that it made me feel uncomfortable. I knew she had a lot going on upstairs, but me being me, I have always been a gentle soul. It's always been very difficult for me to set firm boundaries and to keep those, especially when someone is suffering. One weekend was very busy with homework and a double shift at work, so I ended up getting home very late. I booted up my computer just to check some emails as I ate dinner before zonking out. When Steam loaded, I noticed that I had 100 missed messages and comments, all from Jen. About 30 minutes later, my phone starts going off. Mind you, this is at 12 a.m. Alaskan time, so this would have been 3 a.m. for her. She called my cell phone number with what she had saved from Telegram. She was absolutely out of control. From the moment I picked up the phone, she was screaming obscenities and slurs, intercepted with confessions of love and desperate pleas for me to unblock her so that we could be friends again and that she would make it up to me and all that crap. I tried to explain to her that what she had done was out of line and that I just didn't have the emotional capacity to go through another abusive relationship, but she was having absolutely none of it. I did the only thing I could do. I ended the call and blocked her number. 5 minutes later, I get a call from an unrecognized private number and pick up, knowing exactly what I was in for. It was her again, calling from her parents' landline. I immediately hung up. 15 seconds goes by and my phone rings again. I dismissed the call. My phone rang again about 5 minutes later from the same number. This goes on for a solid 15 minutes before I turned off my phone and went to bed. It was a fairly sleepless night, but thankfully the next day I had class in the evening, so I had the opportunity to sleep in. I woke up from my okay sleep and turned my phone on to find over 100 missed calls and about as many voicemails. I checked my Telegram to talk to a different friend about the chaos that was going on to find messages from 6 new accounts. Most of them just off-the-wall text filled with the same out-of-control ramblings that she had said on the phone. They were the texts of someone who had completely lost it, all over the place, in tone and message, switching back and forth between "I love you" and awful slurs, with little regard of spacing, punctuation, capitalization, or general legibility. I was horrified. I mean, I had seen a fair share of breakdowns, but never ones that impacted me directly. Then I got a phone call, same unknown private number. Hoping that she had calmed down enough to reason, I picked up the phone and she started sobbing and screaming, starting right back in. Mad as hell, I screamed into the phone for her to shut up, and for the first time in probably 14 hours, she did. Very clearly, I told her not to call me again, and that she had gone way over the line, and I wanted nothing to do with her after this. In a calm monotone voice, she makes me shudder to this day when she said, "What do I have to do to prove my love for you? Do you want me to kill myself? How about my dog? I can kill her for you." Honestly, I was shocked. I just told her no, and that if she loved me, she would move on and get help. This was the worst possible answer. Immediately, she started screaming again. I hung up. I'm shaking again, just remembering this all. She called me back consistently for the rest of the morning until I turned my phone off. The next day I went in and got my number changed, hoping that would be the end of it. A few days passed and I'm at work. My boss comes over to me saying that there's a call from my mom. I thought nothing of it until I picked up the phone and heard Jen's voice on the other end. She started talking about how she had started cutting herself and how she would keep going until she was dead if I didn't unblock her. So I hung up the phone without a word. I told my boss to not bother me with phone calls unless it was from a known listed number on my emergency contact file. With my new phone, I set up Telegram again and started going through blocking all of her other accounts, but this still wasn't the end of it. For about 6 months after the whole thing went down, every few weeks I would get a new Telegram contact on a new number begging me to unblock her so we could be together. I know it's not some big climactic end, but honestly, what could I do? All I knew of her at the time was her first name, screen name, and state. If I had reported to the police, nothing would have been done anyways. The cops here don't take kindly to queer people like myself, so I just didn't want to risk any BS with them. Oh, and to the Jen, the Out of Control Lesbian from Ark Survival Evolved, I hope you've gotten help, but please let's never meet again. So this happened about 1 month after I finished high school. I was 18 at the time and tired of being inexperienced. I went to a pretty nerdy school, so I, nor others, were crazy about getting into relationships or hookups. So after seeing my friends dabble with Tinder, I decided to try it myself. I mostly did it for a joke, sending funny pictures to my friends over some weird messages I got or funny bios I found. But I was also up to meet someone, if they seemed fine. So eventually this dude and I started talking, and he asked to meet me at the local hangout, a gas station. That tells you something about my town. He seemed alright, fairly cute, only a year older. I decided it was fine, especially considering one of my friends was at the place, so if this guy was a total weirdo from the start, I could escape. But it was fine, and the first time we hung out in his car, nothing drastic happened. We kissed, but that's all that happened. We hung out in his car again and drove around and made out, but once again, nothing drastic happened. Both of us were kind of just trying to lose our virginity and get it out of the way. My car was small, and so was his, and both of us had pretty strict parents, so we scheduled to meet up next Saturday at a cheap motel to get it over with. So that day comes, I wake up and I'm literally in the worst pain of my life. I was on birth control, but it just made it worse, and I'm in terrible pain. I text him saying that I need to wait a week. Instead of just an alright, or even a slightly annoyed tone, this guy basically tries to pressure me into going anyway. I try to explain that I'm in pain, and if he honestly can't wait a week, he can go find another girl. He starts calling me a liar, saying that I'm making it up so I can sleep with another guy. basically sends me texts from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. calling me all sorts of nasty things, saying I'm really ugly and horribly boring, and that he was just doing this as a favor, and that I'm gonna regret this, and so on. I'm upset, obviously. I never had someone say the things like he said to me. I generally started feeling pretty awful about myself, thinking that I should have just sucked it up and gone with him anyway. It basically put me in a really horrible mood the whole week, so much that I basically turned into a big sobbing mess when I went with my friends camping the following week. It's a week later, and I'm sitting on my screened porch that we have for our cats in the summer. I just got in a kitten and was playing with her, when I see a car that looks like the car that the guy drove. I brush it off until I see the same car drive by again, and again, and again, about 7 times in total. I think back and I realized that I talked about hanging out at a beach a lot, which was right across from my house. Now I'm terrified. My parents aren't home, and if he corners me, I'm in an enclosed room. The only access from the house was the window, which was very hard to open from the outside. After the second time, I ducked so I wasn't visible from the road, and started texting my friend. My friends pulled up and the car stopped coming by, and I hugged them, terrified of what could have happened. My mom and dad come home, and I don't say anything, but I basically forced myself into hanging around them and not being home alone for a few days. About 6 months later, this guy asked me on Facebook. I never once gave him my last name. He texted me saying I'm the most genuine and pretty girl he'd ever met, that when looking back on it, he compared every single girl he's met since, and I'm the top, and he's sorry. I don't think he knew I saw him stalking me. I basically said, that's cool, but don't talk to me again. He hasn't, fortunately. I swore off Tinder for a while, eventually using it far away from home at college. With a happy ending, I met my current boyfriend, so I got to learn some good things and bad things by using online dating apps.